welcome tonight to, I think, what promises to be a really engaging debate as part of a series which my colleague Christian Duell has put together. And from the School of Design's perspective, we're really proud to be able to be involved as a partner in particularly tonight's program, which addresses the broad theme of think outside and society, and in particular the importance of that question of the relationship of the value of design with those questions. The School of Design at QUT has, over the last 1 or 2 years, consolidated in the creative industries. We now have 7 design disciplines, which, as you can imagine, the prospect of multiple and interdisciplinary design discussion is a kind of very healthy environment for the prospect of talking about the issues surrounding design, of which this series will also address. So without any further ado, welcome tonight. Thanks for coming, and I'm going to pass over to Christian to explain the proceedings. Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Christian Duell and I'm the manager of the Asia Pacific Design Library here at State Library of Queensland. Welcome to our first event in our latest series of 3 monthly forums called Think Outside. On behalf of the library, I'd firstly like to thank QUT and Griffith University, who are also sponsoring this series, as well as the Design Institute of Australia and AGDA for promoting the series, and Fino Food and Wine and Mental and Cook for the catering. So a few logistics before we start. Toilets are located outside on levels 2 and level 3. In case of an emergency, follow the exit signs outside, down the stairs, and gather outside Goma. If you need to leave at any time during tonight's event, can you please exit through the rear doors? And also, we're capturing tonight's event on video, so if you don't want to be included in any of this content, please get in touch with us. Can you also please turn your phones to silent, but don't forget to stay involved in the online discussion using the hashtag ThinkOutside and mentioning SLQ APDL on any of your favourite social media channels. For those not familiar with the Asia Pacific Design Library, we are a shared space for industry, academia and the public to come together in the generation of new ideas and knowledge related to design in the Asia Pacific. We seek to passionately advocate for the role of design and design thinking in supporting Queensland and Australia's evolution from a resource economy to a creative economy. A little bit of background on the Think Outside series. So we often talk about design in terms of end products, but we believe it's better to think about design as a process and a way of thinking. The unique creative problem-solving process traditionally used by designers is known as design thinking. Design thinking is becoming increasingly recognised as a powerful tool for exploring the challenges of the 21st century beyond the traditional realm of simply designing products. So design thinking is not just for designers and not just for the world of design. Design thinking is design for the world. We've created Think Outside to test this notion that design thinking can be used to explore some of the world's greatest contemporary challenges. So the Think Outside series is 3 monthly forums where we invite local, international and national design thinkers to contemplate a wicked problem outside their area of expertise. We're curious to explore what happens when these powerful minds are challenged to think outside their comfort zone and apply their way of thinking in new contexts. So before I introduce tonight's guests, I want to talk a little bit about tonight's topic. How might we design out homelessness? Obviously, homelessness is a really complex issue, and we want to acknowledge that there's already a great amount of incredible work being done by so many passionate individuals and organisations on this topic. I want to make it really clear that tonight is not intended to be an expert panel discussion on homelessness. Our speakers are by no means experts in this field. We've invited them to speak based on their expertise as creative thinkers and the possibilities that approaching an old problem from a new perspective might bring. So we don't expect to magically fix this massive challenge in a 1-hour session. What we do hope, however, is that tonight's discussion can inspire new ideas and possibilities within your communities and circles and lead to broader discussion and action on this issue. So shortly, each speaker will be presenting their big idea in response to tonight's challenge in a fast-paced Persichetti-style presentation. After each of our speakers has presented, I'll be facilitating a discussion and debate about the ideas that they've put forward. Your involvement in tonight's discussion is really important. So when you arrived, hopefully you all received an idea card like this one you can see up on the screen. We'd like to encourage you, if you haven't already, to put forward your big idea for designing out homelessness or a question that you'd like to put to our panel and write it on that card during the lecture. And don't forget to share your idea or questions via social media. After the presentations have completed, Liz and Shanoa will come around and collect your cards at the end of each row, and then we'll be trying to take as many of those questions and ideas and put them to the panel during the Q&A. They'll also be on display in our design lounge on level 2 for the next couple of weeks after the forum. So a little bit about tonight's topic, homelessness. Hopefully you were able to see some of Griffith University's QCA Design Futures students' work outside here, and we want to thank them for supporting tonight's event and putting that work on display. A few statistics on homelessness courtesy of Homelessness Australia. So there are currently 105,237 people in Australia who are homeless. 56% are male, 44% are female. 39% are living in severely overcrowded dwellings. 20% are in supported accommodation for the homeless. 17% are staying temporarily with other households. And only 6% are in improvised dwellings, tents, or sleeping out, what we call on the street, I guess. 1% are in other temporary lodging. 25% of the homeless are Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Australians, despite making up only 3% of the total population. And 30% are born overseas. Within Queensland alone, our homeless population is 19,838, and interestingly, this figure has reduced by 5.1% since 2006. So homelessness is a complex issue which encompasses many other societal problems such as unemployment, mental health, family breakdown, and domestic violence. The complexity of this issue means there is no easy solution for homelessness. It's obviously not as simple as just designing a new shelter or a product. It's within this context that we invite our speakers to present their big idea in response to the question, how might we design out homelessness? And our first speaker is Raffaele Persichetti. Raphael, together with his business partner Martin Gordon-Brown, are the founders of Holloway Eyewear. Together, Marty and Raf upcycle skateboards, broken furniture, instruments and used timber into high-quality, beautifully designed eyewear, hoping to inspire others to restore, reuse and give back to the environment. Passionately involved with everything that is essential, industrial designer, environmental strategist, and master of enrichment in world food, fine arts, design and formation, please join me in welcoming Raffaele Persichetti.
Thanks, Christian. So let's the race begin. Homelessness is more of a complex issue than you may I understand. It involves multiple disadvantages, but not only that, the people that are affected, it involves the people who organise, support and supply the services to treat the multiple disadvantaged people. There's two main key issues that we've come across talking with many different people that are involved is there's not enough accommodation and there's no capital to support ongoing services. Funding is drying up. And capital investment is also tricky to obtain. So, can we create capital? Yes, internal revenue in action, we can create capital. Essential items created by the homeless for the homeless. The Empowerment Plan is a Detroit-based scheme where a young woman employed homeless people to manufacture jackets and sleeping bags into one beautiful design that is distributed through the homeless, which is 1 in 42 in Detroit. Physical designs for people is very important. It's the first step. Secondly, systems design and homeless is vital. Systems design is really the key to the issue of homelessness. And that's where we'll go into the next. Are these projects sustainable? Yes, they're very sustainable and they can be if managed correctly. Waste streams create viable, low input, essential designs. Through waste streams, we can create these physical designs that can help homeless work and supply and create a capital stream. By managed collection teams, and which creates incentives for waste usage and gives people a chance to actually work on that project and have a meaning to their daily lives. So in Australia, 55% of all landfill is from the construction industry. So in saying that, if we think really carefully, there is an ample amount of materials that are thrown away that can be used, utilised, not just put in a skip and taken to landfill. And the space exists. We have the space throughout land, throughout the properties, rooftops, buildings, all around. So we need to build to suit using and repurposing those materials, which is one of our first protocols for physical action for the physical problem. Biomimicry is always a good practice in solving designs, imitating and looking at how nature goes the way about its own natural design. So there's many infrastructures and buildings that already exist, which can support other life streams or other smaller host buildings from them. Urban gardens, it's happening very much so. It's happening extremely throughout America and Europe at the moment, and it needs to be focused more locally as well. So it creates a new habitat which is for us to live and eat, and it creates a workflow and options for people to work towards something, live in it and supply food. So just to imagine Brisbane landscapes, Brisbane buildings with urban gardens on the top of them, where people have dwellings not only to live but to manage the garden and also to supply a farmery where we can pick our own fruit, herbs, vegetables, and supply in not only the building where it might be located, but the general public can come in and pick your own. It's something that's able to be initiated straight away, and it's here, it's happening, and we need to embrace it. So what now? Now it gets into systems designs. It's so important to look at systems designs for this problem. We need one portal across all organisations that is the connective tissue to link homelessness and people that are affected with helpers, with people that are offering the supportive structures and services. So imagine a web platform to link and connect the homeless with the helpers across all organisations involved with this topic. It's extremely important. So undergraduates would register and they would log in and they would select what they are interested in helping and looking at, and vice versa. It's very simple as well. There's 100,000 approximately homeless, 1 million vacant dwellings, approximately that we know of here in Australia at the present moment. So it's just a numbers game. We need to look at unused rental properties, abandoned dwellings. We need to appropriate the funds that have been established to build new buildings on new land, which is somewhat ridiculous when we can appropriate and use the existing structures for a much more minimal amount than what's being stipulated in the current policies. Still, they'll be necessary to build new structures, and if so, let form follow function. Build with repurposed materials, build for need, build fast, build smart, build simple, and we can supply fast, essential homes for people in need. Shelter can be a simple thing, the physicalities of it, if we embrace, if we manage it correctly, if we look at policies and try as hard as we can to change them. So we need to plan for this change. We need to inspire as much as we can for the outcome. We need universities that actually target the real world, that actually focus on real world problems in depth and straight to the point, and for the new world, for now and the future, not for the past, not for 15, 20, not for 30 years ago. And the mass needs to act as one. You could start tonight. The Mercy Foundation is putting between $5,000 and $50,000 on ceiling grants to appropriate new ideas that can be established into the future to design and move out homelessness. So, yeah, time's wasting. Thank you.
Wow, Raph, thanks a lot. That was like a brain explosion. We really appreciate how hard it is for our speakers to cram so many ideas or a succinct message in 6 minutes and 40 seconds. That's part of the challenge, that we want big ideas and we want them to kind of reach you immediately tonight. So it's spare a thought for our speakers. It's really challenging. Our next speaker is Associate Professor Dr. Barbara Atkins. Associate Professor Dr. Barbara Atkins is a sociologist in the School of Design at Queensland University of Technology. Her research, teaching and postgraduate supervision focuses on the emerging and exciting intersection between design and sociality. Projects she supervises include the visual communication of the effects of climate change and the way that children with mobility-related disabilities experience urban settings. She collaborates with design colleagues to investigate the way the design world can contribute to more seamless journeys for people with disabilities. Please join me in welcoming Associate Professor Dr. Barbara Atkins.
Thank you. Before I begin, a very brief preamble. My presentation owes a lot to other ideas besides my own. Key in this area is the work done by Mica Projects quite locally. You might be aware that not 500 metres from where we're sitting now is the Common Ground building, which actually was purposefully designed to house people who have been homeless and to help them stay in housing. Mica Projects was crucial to that, and they were crucial to the collection of data from which I will briefly quote. You'll be pleased to know that most of the words tonight are theirs and not mine. Although that being said, you'll probably say, as a designer, she makes a great sociologist because there's probably too much text. But nevertheless, forgive me. It's in the interest of conveying the voice of the experience of people who are trying at this point in time to move out of homelessness. So to begin with some text. Design thinking involves moving back from an issue such as homelessness to framing design problems and questions. A key resource in this is how people are actually trying to do this at this point in time. So my interest in designing out of homelessness is about the idea that homelessness is more than a public issue and a social problem. It's a personal experience. To move out of homelessness into housing does not end homelessness. It still remains for the occupant to create residence. I want to introduce you to John, our interviewee. He was shown a concept of housing designed to alleviate homelessness, and the stories he came up with imagined encounters with objects in his new place. It became clear that once the building is finished, the design work doesn't end. He needs to create a home. Housing First is an approach to alleviating homelessness that provides secure, safe and affordable housing in tandem with services. And this is a key feature of the context that John experiences. Common Ground Brisbane is the site, not 500 metres from where we're sitting, that actually embodies or tries to embody in its design features that are meant to encourage people to stay there, to find their way out of homelessness. It entails provisions for security, such as the concierge desk, places for chance encounters, such as mailboxes, capacity to see people beyond the floor of your apartment building, a secure apartment building, gardens for people to work in or socialise. However, this still remains a concept. From John's point of view, what does it mean to reside here? When we asked him that, he told us a story replete with objects. I want to talk about 3 of them. Light switches, doorbell and intercom, and collections. Each of these objects have a history predating his imagined residence, but each of them has deep significance in his imagined rhythms in living in this place. Light switches predates the experience of moving in. Before that, you have the sense that you've been living by candlelight, And when it gets dark, that's it, you know. The prohibitions of homelessness, no choice. And you walk into the apartment and you turn on a light, and wow, there's a light, so to speak. This speaks to the immediacy of the experience and the stark difference from life on the street. But there's a dark side to this. He says, I'll just say one thing. What you'll feel, your head will become half empty because there's a lot of things that you don't have to worry about. So you've got a gap. You might even sink into a hole a bit, you know. Security technologies, intercom, similarly starts with an experience on the street. Living like we've lived over the years, you've never had full control of your life. You have to seek permission to go in and it's denied. You find it hard to control all your possessions. There are no boundaries. But lo and behold, the security technologies now mobilise John right into the forefront of controlling his life, of giving permission to other people to come in. I'm sick of that person. Sorry, no, away you go, he imagines himself saying. Collections was an important thing for John. Collections on the part of people who are homeless often go by the wayside altogether. John was lucky, he gave part of his collection to his sister. But still, the incapacity to have that collection symbolises a life on hold. When you walk into your apartment, you can line the walls, according to John, with your own little artwork. All your little collectibles, your matchbox cars, you can put them on the mantelpiece, and he calls it a sentimental piece. This goes further into the unit itself. He says, in your own little unit, it's yours forever if you want. It gives you a sense of pride, and you know that's your little space. You do it up for yourself, no more running. So this is permanence and a feeling of being able to invest in the future. So what does this now all mean for us designing out of homelessness? John is designing himself out of homelessness. And it means that turning on a light or answering the doorbell requires more than the habit memory of pushing a button or flicking a switch. It involves also managing the real memories evoked by light switches, security technologies, and countless other objects. Memories of life on the street and the difference between then and now. It also involves ordering space and time in your new imagined place, creating and maintaining identity, buying another matchbox car, accumulating being. We all know in this room how important identity is in getting on in this world. Finally, we come back to our question, and here's Janus, the god of the before and the after. How can we support this ongoing work of managing, ordering, integrating, and taming the designed environment to create residence? Thank you.
Oh dear, did I do something? Sorry, spoiler. I put the clicker in my pocket and it just clicked away. Thank you, Barbara. That was really thoughtful, and I love the way that you represented the question, a new question at the end of that. Thank you. Our final speaker is Catherine Griffiths. Catherine is an independent designer and typographer living and working between Auckland and Paris. She collaborates with artists, architects and designers, scientists and engineers, while also lecturing and working with students. In 2009, together with Simone Wolfe, she conceived, curated and organised Typeshed 11, New Zealand's first ever international typography symposium. Her response as a designer and typographer is shaped by circumstance, an appreciation for content and meaning, the written word and the image. Please join me in welcoming Catherine Griffiths.
Thanks, Christian. Thank you. Okay, let's go. The other day, in my research for the 6 minutes 40 seconds, I met with a 25-year-old A+ student in social policy about to head off to the London School of Economics to do her master's. At first, she couldn't reconcile design with homelessness, so I gave her my little riff on word association. Her eyes lit up. She recognised the possibility. I know homefulness is not a word, it's not a solution, but it presents another way of thinking, another way of looking. How I get to where I go, or go to where I get, is hard to explain. It's intangible. Is it useful to know that I am a synesthete, seeing the alphabet in colour, time and numbers and space, and that I am left-handed? Who knows? To come in at a problem, to find a journey or find a solution, is a journey of knowledge and understanding, a journey of poetic imagination. I find passages that are not expected. I lose myself. I think intuitively. I desire an alternate route. I try to take people with me. The brief for this forum, Thinking Outside, was to use images rather than text. And if we do use text, then Arial, Helvetica or Calibri. To show 20 images 20 seconds apart, to speak strictly for 6 minutes 40 seconds, and to avoid talking about our own work. Sure, talk about prescription, a proscription. I'm a typographer. I work with letters, words. I interpret. I articulate. I attempt to find a voice. I search outside the framework and use prescription, a brief, as a point of departure. So, how might we design out homelessness? The solutions are social, political, and other things, as Barbara has pointed out. As a designer, I don't have the solution, but I do have a tool, a way of imagining and visualizing, of conceptualizing that can perplex, and it can excite. I attempt in my practice to make meaning without overthinking, to share elements we take for granted, such as the letter form, negative space, shadow, these tear-off phone numbers, to consider the message, to find a connection, to make a point, to see what happens. Coming in at an oblique angle is not necessarily a deliberate act, although speaking about it does make it part of my consciousness. It's part of a journey to a voice. The power of language as a way to communicate, whether written, spoken or signed, is democratic. It belongs to everybody. What fascinates me about the wordplay homelessness to homefulness is that it demonstrates a non-recognisable social condition flipped on its head. You know, I recall a homeless man years ago who would disperse about Wellington's pavements religious messages written in felt pen on ice block sticks. They were his method of communication, his thoughts, his protest, his voice. In the Wellington Writers' Walk, a commissioned project back in 2000, and you'll see this in a second, turned an idea on its head while you're not seeing the project. The brief from the Writers' Walk Committee asked for a series of Foundry standard bronze plaques placed squarely into the ground of the Civic Square. And my response was large-scale concrete text sculptures positioned unexpectedly along the city's waterfront. The concept worthy of the words and authors they were wanting to celebrate. Monumental in scale, these objects are living, breathing, susceptible to change as they take on the environment. The Heart Foundation of New Zealand and the Wellington City Council commissioned a series of distance markers to encourage fitness and health. I wanted them to see what I could see, the beauty in numbers, and not obscure the message with their own celebration. No promo, no logos, just the numbers, straightforward, and they bought into it. What they stand for, marking out distance along the waterfront, is there to be figured out by the viewer, simply by walking, running from one to the next. Like a jigsaw, it starts to piece together. Once understood, forever understood. That discovery and the delight in finding meaning is satisfying and empowering. There's something about owning a discovery, gaining knowledge. It is yours, your own thought, your own space, your own decision, your self-worth. And that's Don Dudley's red corner that I pinched off the internet. How you choose to share that, then, is over to you, and writers do this all the time. In this case, Bruce Connew with photographs in his book, I Must Behave. As US non-fiction author Rebecca Solnit said, books are solitudes in which we meet. Improvisation is another part of my thinking, my journey, my landscape. I stay true to myself by being honest, nimble, by being free to respond, taking risks. There is no formula. I allow serendipity to play its part, to see what comes. And that was Marie Shannon's Love Notes. I allow materiality, and by that I mean light, dark, space, sound, the surfaces, to play its part, the tone and pitch. These are all part of an atmosphere, a feeling, a voice. If design can be reconciled with the notion of homelessness, it is by way of offering an alternate process to what has gone before, other ways of thinking, a leap of possibility for those who can effect change.
Thank you very much, Catherine. So hopefully you've been playing along at home there and you've completed something on your card. So Liz and Chanel are going to come along and collect those. If you want to pass a question or a comment or an idea from your card down to the end of your row. In the meantime, I would like to invite our panel up on stage and we'll commence the discussion. What struck me, which was part of the intention of having three very different designers or design thinkers on this panel, was the different angles that you came from to explore the problem. Raph, I was really interested in a few of your ideas. So there was this idea around waste collection and how that can be used to build resources, but also build an economy and a system around that. I thought the online system for connecting need with availability was really interesting as well, and the idea of reuse. So maybe starting with the idea around waste collection, do you see that as something that is merely a way of reallocating resources or making good use of resources, or how would you see that panning out as a kind of economy or a system where money is involved in building that kind of infrastructure?
Well, it's not only just a case of collecting the waste. It's in regards to this topic. It's the policies that are in place for the funding and the bonds, obviously extremely high, millions and millions of dollars, to manufacture and create old-style houses on large parcels of land, which are extremely expensive, long-winded, and extremely costly and not efficient. So collecting waste is not only an extremely viable option, as the materials initially are free, and not only is it environmentally friendly, it's an extremely viable way of building from free sources to solve problems that, instead of using the funds to build using new materials and new outlines. So it's an initial and fast way to target physical design immediately.
Yeah, absolutely. Barbara, there was a beautiful message around creating home and homelessness is more than just giving someone a building or a roof over their head. And I found some of the comments that you made, particularly around, I guess, would you call it post-worry depression, when there's a lot of those worries are taken out of the equation, there's this kind of emotional or psychological space. In any of this kind of research, have you found that it's difficult for certain people to remain in that environment, in the shared, in the common ground environment?
Yes, well, even in John's voice, we find it a bit tenuous and tentative, don't we? I mean, you just get a feeling from his imagination of how he might inhabit the place, that there's two sides to it, and it could go either way. And I was very intrigued at the role that he volunteered objects to play, ordinary objects. And of course the lesson here is not to redesign individual objects necessarily, but to understand his experience in terms of the configuration of those things and what they mean. I think what I would love to hear tonight, because I'm not a designer, is how designers might respond to the fact that it's not just one object we're talking about, but a system of objects that can create that Jana's face, that double experience of being delighted and comfortable, but that other side of being, what do I do now? What does it all mean?
Catherine, maybe you have a response to that?
I do. I was very interested in what you were saying, sort of reverb there. And it was interesting because my thing is, it's like being given a set of clothes and being, there for you to wear, and they're not necessarily your clothes you would like to wear. I think that's a dilemma, and the thing of being provided something that is perhaps, you're being provided something, but it's not necessarily something you feel comfortable with. It's not you necessarily, and I think that's, everyone is different, and we all have different sort of requirements or ways of being, and I think it's actually quite tricky.
It's how do you appropriate your own objects and give them meaning and identify with them as well? Yeah. Catherine, your presentation was very much about the power of communication and how potentially communication can have a massive impact in the world. I mean, do you think communication is enough, or is communication enough of a powerful starting point to lead to knowledge? How powerful do you think communication is in this problem, in this equation?
I think it has the potential to be extremely powerful, and at different levels. I guess I was just trying to show how, by talking about it and finding a voice and kind of putting it out there, making or presenting ways of thinking through reading and language, I guess. I sort of said this in my piece. I think by using language or communication, you can encourage people to think differently, and I guess that's the powerful part. So it could be aimed at government, it could be aimed at providing, and I didn't want to say this in my talk because I don't think this is the right way to approach it, by kind of giving a platform upon which a voice can be heard, although that's again sort of being presumptuous about some states of being. So
what about a bit of a synergy, Raf, between what you were talking about with this online platform and your connecting need with availability and giving a voice? Do you think that storytelling or communicating as well is those two kind of ideas could work together?
Yeah, most definitely. And the emotional aspect of feeling comfortable with objects is extremely important. Though I totally agree with what you're saying. Though the initial issue is that can't be done on the street. We have social workers and occupational therapists and professionals that support these services, and that is their profession. So in the research with Homeless Australia and Community Housings Australia and other bureaus and organisations that we've discussed with, the two main keys, as talked about before, is lack of accommodation and the funds and bonds being pulled away by certain governments, the government and certain legislations and policies that are not able to feed the people, the professionals, the social workers, the occupational therapists, the counsellors, the doctors, the nurses that support the multiple disadvantaged.
So your online platform could essentially provide a starting point or a central point where people could donate,
exactly,
or see where the need is in certain organisations, and
for the multiple disadvantaged, in the first aspect where they could register online for their needs and they're connective not only with the current practicing professionals but also undergraduates that are looking for real life, and in that sense where universities are targeting more directly instead of creating a scenario within the university arena, targeting the real issue directly, immediately during study.
One thing that struck me with the statistics and that only 6% of homeless are living effectively, on the street. So there's this 94% that we could call the invisible homeless. And I just wonder if, using technology, augmented reality, location-based apps, that you become connected to the problem in real time and in real space, through that network as well.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, and it requires correct management and access. And for teams to prioritise that and to make that available.
Okay, are we ready to cross to the floor? Have we got some questions? Liz and Shanoa up the back.
Hello. We've got lots of questions, so apologies, we probably won't get to all of them tonight, but they will be on display in the Design Library. This was a really interesting one. How can we think about designing out homelessness without thinking about what is home?
Barbara, you've probably got something to say.
Well, that's a very good question. I mean, the thing about design, we smuggle in a lot of default assumptions here, and it's all very well for me to talk, I'm not one. But what becomes quite stark to me is design is assumed to be what designers do, when in fact the voice of John tells us he's in the business of carrying on design. When the buildings are quitted or the products are made, he's the one that's got to put it together and make home. He's the one doing that. And in fact, the amount of research or knowledge on just how that works and what that difficult precipice is like and what we can do is infinitesimal. I gave a paper at the National Homelessness Conference last year, and I was the only one that even mentioned design. So the answer to the question is it's a very important question. We need to understand home from the vantage point of people who are homeless, but we also need to study the in situ processes of their trying to make something home. That's the only way we will end homelessness ultimately.
Great question.
Given the complexities associated with homelessness, are we able to propose a one-stop solution without considerations of case-by-case basis? How do you consult and design with homeless people?
So is this question about how we talk to homeless people about design?
And I think how you get them involved in the process as well.
How you get them involved in the process. Well, I am not an expert on that. I profited a lot from the collection of the data in John's voice. I think one of the things we need to do, I think, is to follow people's experience where it leads. One thing we can be sure of is that as we speak, there are many, many, many people engaged in trying to design themselves out of homelessness. And we need to take the lead from them to find out where they are and hope that they'll teach us about that. I think then we can bracket what we'll design and find that out and put all these great minds together and work out some innovative ideas from there.
So it's about communicating or success stories or pathways,
Yes.
which kind of fits into your idea of a communication platform and celebrating those examples. I mean, obviously there's not a one pathway either, so that presents complexity as well. More from the floor?
More. So I have another one. If we understand dwelling as Heidegger did, meaning dwelling as being in the world, and take under consideration the contemporary global conditions, so things like exhaustion of natural resources, wars, climate change, how can that be translated into a design thinking relevant to homelessness?
I mean, I think one clue here is when, if you think about various problems that people have tried to solve. I mean, as baby boomers reach our 60s and 70s, we start to need memory aids, and we start thinking about things like what can help us. And of course, there's a tradition in what they call the cognitive prosthesis, designed memory aids. And in the early days, it was seen as creative ways to jog memory. And now the product designers, and there's big money in that, in terms of knowing how to use the latest technology to jog your memory, to help you with shopping lists, to know where products are on shelves and so on. And I'm thinking, I don't have dementia, but gee, that would help me. It's called different things, but what it means is that homelessness, cognitive impairment, all sorts of things create what we might call an extreme case of something that's more prevalent. And I think that's the point you're making. And this is why John's contribution here is so important, because we can learn a lot from him about our own making of home, become more conscious of that, and possibly what brings us together.
And that sense of displacement as well, I mean, in many cases can be disconnected from a structure.
Yes.
As well.
Yes, exactly.
Thanks for explaining. One more?
Yeah, one more. Most of the speakers started to talk about designing a solution that the person is being homeless. What would they suggest to design out a problem actually being the cause of their homelessness? So we've had a couple of other questions about mental illness as well, so the causes as opposed to...
Is there any particular cause that we want to explore?
We've had quite a few questions about mental illness, so maybe someone could talk about that.
Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
Well, from my perspective, and I'm not a professional on the topic though, I believe that it is extremely important to keep supporting the current support and the services and the people that are the professionals within, the treatments and the aid and the management of this. They're the people that are doing the amazing work. They have studied and are passionate and are focused on these issues, and we need to continue the support for that. Otherwise, it cannot continue, and it is more and more, as we said, because of funding and bonds drying up, it's harder and harder to support and to pay those people to do the right work, to help and to create services and to organise not only the placement and the treatment, and the ongoing care.
I think, Raf, the point that you made about there being, was it 1 million buildings or dwellings that are currently unoccupied, and we have 100,000 people who are currently homeless.
This has been brought to our attention, which was an initial idea. That is a current approximate statistic, and that has been brought to our attention by two gentlemen here that are from the Reset franchise, which are currently developing and fighting for change within the property management arena to focus on utilising vacant properties and dwellings, and to be the link between those vacant properties for placement and housing.
There seems to be a connection. I mean, this is a bigger, wicked problem, I suppose, but there's a similar situation with food distribution, that the global food availability is equivalent to the need, but distribution is, the bigger issue. Perhaps connecting services to the people is also as much an issue as supporting the people who are giving the services as well.
Yeah, the connection and the connection and the support is most vital. It's the system in place that needs to be maintained and continually to be modified.
Okay, we've got some very obvious questions up. We've probably got time for one more, guys. So if you want to pick one, and obviously, we as we said at the start, this is not intended to be like the solution to homelessness, but we're creating an environment here to foster your own discussions within your communities and to encourage your own action in whatever way you see possible. So hopefully this is a starting point. And we have a platform on Design Online where this discussion will continue as well, so I hope you can join us in that. Chanel, do you want to grab one of those questions, or do you guys have one of those?
I have a bit of a challenging one. So are designers enhancing the negation of homelessness by designing so as to retain the conditions of superficial stability? So take, for example, the redesign of the flooded areas of Queensland and New York and other areas that have been heavily affected by climate disasters.
Was that one of you guys asked that question? No? Okay. Sorry.
I haven't had a chance to actually read.
That's okay. Yet. So there was a relationship between the way that designers are designing to exclude people in the case of disaster. Is that who asked that question? Does someone want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, hi. I think the key is in retaining the condition of superficial stability in the first place. The world's changing, and it relates to the question before in a way. We've got a whole bunch of impending crises happening. The world is unsettled. Are we enhancing the negation of homelessness when actually that's not the real problem? The problem is the superficial stability that we act like we can retain.
Yeah, that's a big question, isn't it? I mean, probably not going to cover that in the next 5 minutes. But,
it's hard to sort of answer that in a blanket fashion. But one of the problems of design, and this might be what you're getting at, is that many designs are answers in search of the right question. One of the questions I think we do need to genuinely ask with respect to homelessness is what configuration of objects and spaces and images and all sorts of things are going to create what we call ontological security. That's not perfect security, it's not superficial security. It could be found in an Indigenous family up in Port Stewart under the stars with no built structure. But it's what configuration of those things create sufficient predictability and safety, and this is not bliss by any means, but sufficient stability and safety for them to get up the next day and fight for their health or their education or whatever else they need. I think that's the bottom line.
Yeah, sure. I guess, thinking about ontological security, the question is secure being stable in one place,
No.
in one striated space? We're a pretty rigid society, and that's been an invention of the last sort of 500 years at least. Should we actually become more unsettled? Should we become more nomadic and actually learn from the homeless in the way that they interact with the world?
Well, yes, I mean, you've hit the nail on the head. I think homelessness engages us to challenge a priori assumptions about what stability and that sort of thing is and what it achieves. And here we have a whole collection of people engaging in design thinking, which, as I understand it, is about going against the a priori assumptions, the answers, the rush to answers, without asking, to holding and honouring and asking what the problem is.
Absolutely. I'll have to wrap it up there, but obviously we've asked more questions than we've answered, which is fantastic, and we hope that this discussion can continue. Raf, you presented some very interesting ideas about connecting need with availability. Barbara, you really highlighted to us how the total environment of the home and how we design our own identity in our world through our objects. And Catherine, you suggested the possibility of communication, and that communication leads to knowledge, and knowledge can empower. So I'd like you to please join me in thanking our guest panel, Raffaele Persichetti, Associate Professor Dr. Barbara Atkins, and Katherine Griffiths. Tonight's event has been recorded, and a range of content will be available for you to download this time next week from designonline.org.au. Our next forum in this series takes place 1 month from now on the 15th of October, and we're very excited to welcome all the way from the UK John Thakura. John is the author of the very popular column at designobserver.com and is of the best-selling book In the Bubble, Designing in a Complex World. He chairs the World Design Forum in the Netherlands and also sits on the UK Parliament's Standing Design Commission. So John will lead a discussion around how might we design a sustainable model of ecotourism. And given the projected growth of Queensland tourism and also some of our delicate environmental sites like the Great Barrier Reef, this will be a really important discussion. So please make sure you RSVP for this event on Eventbrite. John will also be running a one-day design thinking masterclass on Monday the 14th of October, so keep an eye out on our social media if you're interested in that for more details. Thank you again for your contribution to tonight, and thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you next time. Good night.